Imagine this. It's a Tuesday afternoon in Midtown Manhattan. Inside a nondescript rehearsal studio on 42nd Street, 40 people are gathered around a long table. Actors, musicians, a director, a choreographer, designers, a stage manager with a binder thicker than a phone book. They are about to begin the process of building something that doesn't exist yet. Something that will eventually play 8 times a week in front of 1,600 people a night, with no second takes, no editing suite, no safety net. And here's what's remarkable. In roughly 4 weeks, this group of people, many of whom have never worked together before, will create a production so seamless, so precise, so alive, that audiences will believe it was always meant to be exactly this way. How does that happen? That's what we're going to talk about today. Because the principles that make a Broadway rehearsal room one of the most effective collaborative environments on earth are not exclusive to theater. They belong to anyone who leads a team, builds a product, or tries to create something extraordinary under pressure. I'm Gilad, and this is Curtain Call Conversations. Welcome to the very first episode of Curtain Call Conversations. I am so glad you're here. Before we dive in, let me tell you why I wanted to start the entire series with this topic. I've spent my career in the Broadway producing world. I produced The Outsiders, which won the Tony Award for Best Musical in 2024. And I've been proud to co-produce some of the most celebrated shows of the past 2 decades. Moulin Rouge the Musical, which earned 10 Tony Awards. Jagged Little Pill, which won the Grammy for Best Musical Theater Album. Merrily We Roll Along, which won the Tony for Best Revival. Angels in America, Buena Vista Social Club, which just won a Grammy, and many more. Through my company, In Fine Company, alongside my partner Larry Rogowski, I've had the privilege of sitting in on hundreds of rehearsals, watching some of the most talented people in the world do their work. But I've also spent a lot of time in the other world, the corporate world, speaking to executives, working with business leaders, sitting in boardrooms and conference rooms. And what I've noticed again and again is this: the problems that keep corporate leaders up at night. Communication breakdowns, lack of trust, resistance to feedback, teams that can't adapt when things go sideways. These are problems that Broadway solves every single day. Not perfectly, not without struggle, but consistently and at an extraordinarily high level. So let's start where every Broadway show starts. Not on stage, not in a theater, at a table. On the first day of rehearsal for a Broadway musical, the entire company gathers together. Cast, creative team, designers, stage management. And they sit around a table and they read the script, out loud, together, from beginning to end. Now, in the corporate world, how often does an entire team sit down together before a major project and align on the story they're trying to tell? How often does everyone, not just the leadership, not just the department heads, but everyone, hear the same words at the same time and begin from the same page? In my experience, almost never. But on Broadway, it's non-negotiable. It's called the table read, and it's followed by what we call table work. Days, sometimes a full week, of sitting together and analyzing the material. What does this scene mean? What does this character want? What is the emotional journey of this moment? Why does this story matter? No one is on their feet yet. No one is blocking scenes or learning choreography. They're building a shared understanding of purpose. They're making sure that every single person in that room knows not just what they're doing, but why they're doing it. And here's the thing that business leaders miss. This isn't wasted time. This isn't a luxury. This is the foundation that makes everything else possible. When a team shares a deep understanding of purpose, they can make faster decisions, give better feedback, and adapt more quickly when things change. And on Broadway, things always change. Now, let's talk about something that Google spent millions of dollars researching and that Broadway directors have understood intuitively for generations. In 2012, Google launched a study called Project Aristotle. They wanted to understand what makes some teams spectacularly successful and others mediocre. They studied hundreds of teams across the company, looking at every variable you can imagine: team composition, personality types, educational backgrounds, management styles. And what they found surprised everyone. The single most important factor in high-performing teams was not intelligence. It was not experience. It was not even talent. It was psychological safety. Psychological safety means that every person on the team feels safe to take risks, to speak up, to make mistakes, and to be vulnerable, without fear of punishment or humiliation. Now, if you've ever watched a Broadway rehearsal, you've seen psychological safety in action, even if you didn't have a name for it. Think about what we ask actors to do. We ask them to stand in front of their peers and try something they've never tried before, to make bold choices that might not work, to be emotionally open, physically expressive, and creatively daring, in real time, in front of other people. That requires an enormous amount of trust. And the best directors know that creating that trust is their first and most important job. A great director doesn't walk into a rehearsal room and say, "Stand here, say it this way, look angry." That's not directing, that's dictating. And it produces work that is technically correct, but emotionally dead. A great director creates conditions where actors feel safe enough to discover something unexpected. They ask questions instead of giving orders. What do you think your character wants in this moment? What happens if you try it a completely different way? What if the opposite is true? They guide without controlling. They challenge without threatening. And when something doesn't work, which happens constantly because that's the nature of creative exploration, they respond not with criticism, but with curiosity. That's interesting. Let's try something else. There's a beautiful phrase I've heard used in rehearsal rooms. "I'm going to let you stumble, but I'm never going to let you fall." That's the essence of psychological safety. You're allowed to take risks, you're allowed to fail, but you're never alone in it. Now, think about your workplace. Think about your last team meeting. Did people feel safe enough to say, "I don't think this is working"? Did anyone feel comfortable proposing an idea that might sound crazy? Did the most junior person in the room feel as empowered to speak as the most senior? If the answer is no, you don't have a trust problem. You have a culture problem. And the rehearsal room has a blueprint for fixing it. This brings us to one of the most important and most misunderstood aspects of the Broadway process: feedback. In the theater world, we call it giving notes. After a rehearsal or a run-through, the director gathers the company and gives notes. These are specific, immediate observations about what worked, what didn't, and what needs to change. And here's what makes Broadway's feedback culture radically different from what happens in most corporate environments. First, it's immediate. Notes are given the same day, often within minutes of the work being done. There's no waiting for a quarterly review. There's no scheduling a meeting 3 weeks from now to discuss something that happened today. The feedback is fresh and it's relevant. Second, it's specific. A good note is never vague. It's never, "That scene didn't feel right," or "You need to do better." It's, "In the second act, when you cross to the window, I need you to take a beat before you speak." Let the audience feel the weight of that moment. It tells the performer exactly what to adjust and why. Third, and this is the most important part, The feedback is always in service of the work, not in service of ego. A director doesn't give notes to prove they're in charge. They give notes because the show needs to be better. And everyone in the room understands that. The note isn't personal, it's professional. It's about the shared goal of making the best possible production. In the corporate world, feedback is often delayed, vague, and loaded with politics. People soften their language to the point where the message disappears, or they deliver criticism in a way that feels like a personal attack. Or, worst of all, they avoid giving feedback entirely because they're afraid of conflict. Broadway can't afford any of that. When you have 4 weeks to build a show that will be judged by the toughest critics in the world, you don't have time for diplomatic evasion. You need honesty. You need specificity. And you need a culture where honesty is understood as an act of respect, not aggression. One of the things I've learned from being in the producing world is that the best creative teams are the ones where everyone feels both safe and challenged. Safe enough to try bold things. Challenged enough to keep pushing beyond what's comfortable. That's a delicate balance, and it requires leaders who understand that kindness and candor are not opposites. They're partners. Now I want to introduce you to someone you've probably never thought about, but who is arguably the most important leader in any Broadway production: the stage manager. If you've been to a Broadway show, you've seen the actors, you've heard the orchestra, you've marveled at the sets and costumes and lighting, but you've never seen the stage manager, and that's exactly the point. The stage manager is the person who holds the entire production together. They are the communication hub between every department: the director, the actors, the designers, the crew, the producers. They maintain the schedule. They track every blocking change, every prop placement, every lighting cue. They run the rehearsal room with precision and calm. And once the show opens and the director leaves, the stage manager becomes the guardian of the production, ensuring that every performance maintains the standard that was set. A Broadway stage manager's prompt book, the master document that contains every cue, every note, every piece of information about the production, is one of the most extraordinary organizational documents you'll ever see. It's a living record of hundreds of decisions, thousands of details, and the collective knowledge of an entire creative team. Now, here's what business leaders should understand about stage managers. They lead without authority in the traditional sense. They don't hire or fire. They don't set the creative vision. They don't make the big strategic decisions, but they make everything work. They are the operational backbone that allows creative leadership to flourish. In the corporate world, we tend to celebrate the big idea people, the CEOs, the founders, the strategists, and we should. But we often undervalue the people who make the vision operational. The project managers, the operations directors, the people who turn strategy into execution. Broadway knows that without the stage manager, the most brilliant director in the world is just a person with good ideas and no way to implement them. If you run a company, ask yourself, who is your stage manager? Who is the person making sure that every department is communicating, every deadline is tracked, every detail is accounted for? And are you giving that person the recognition and support they deserve? Let me tell you something about Broadway that might surprise you. On a typical Broadway musical, there are at least 350 to 400 people involved in every single performance. Actors, musicians, stagehands, dressers, lighting operators, sound engineers, front of house staff, box office, management. 350 people working in concert 8 times a week. And here's what's even more remarkable. On almost any given performance, the exact combination of people doing the show has never worked together before in exactly that configuration. Understudies go on. Swings cover multiple roles. Crew members rotate. Yet the audience experiences the same show at the same standard every single night. How is that possible? It's possible because Broadway operates on what I call the ensemble mindset. And the ensemble mindset is built on a simple but powerful idea. The show is bigger than any individual. In an ensemble, every person knows their role, but they also watch the whole system. They're not just responsible for their part, they're responsible for the entire production. If something goes wrong, and something always goes wrong, they don't wait for someone to tell them what to do. They adapt, they cover, they solve the problem in real time, because they understand that the audience's experience depends on everyone, not just the stars. This is fundamentally different from how most corporations operate. In most companies, people are responsible for their department, their function, their silo. If something goes wrong in another area, it's someone else's problem. The result is an organization that looks efficient on paper, but falls apart under pressure. Broadway can't work that way. When an actor's costume tears during a quick change, the dresser doesn't file a report and wait for approval. They grab the gaffer tape and fix it in 30 seconds because the actor has to be back on stage in 60. When an understudy goes on with minimal rehearsal, the entire cast adjusts, subtly, instinctively, to support them, because the show must go on. That phrase, "the show must go on," isn't just a cliché. It's a deeply held value that shapes every decision, every interaction, every moment in a Broadway production. And it's a value that every organization could benefit from adopting. What is your version of "the show must go on"? What is the shared commitment that transcends individual roles and departments and unites your entire team around a common purpose? Now, I want to talk about something that Silicon Valley thinks it invented, but that Broadway has been doing for over a century: iteration. In the tech world, they call it agile development. Build something, test it, get feedback, improve it, repeat. It's considered revolutionary. And it is powerful. But Broadway has been doing this since long before anyone wrote a manifesto about it. After weeks of rehearsal, a Broadway show enters what we call the preview period. These are public performances. Audiences pay for tickets, they see a full production, but the show is not yet frozen. It's still being refined. During previews, the creative team watches every performance with the audience. They observe what lands and what doesn't. They listen for the laughs that come in unexpected places and the silences where there should be gasps. They feel the energy of the room. And then, every day, they make changes. A song gets cut. A scene gets rewritten. A transition gets restaged. Sometimes the changes are small. A lighting adjustment, a tempo shift. Sometimes they're enormous. Entire numbers are replaced. Characters are reimagined. The ending is rewritten. This is not failure. This is the process. The creative team understands that you cannot fully know how a show works until it meets a live audience. The rehearsal room gives you a hypothesis. The preview period gives you data. And here's the key. The team has to be willing to let go of things they love. A song that took months to write might get cut because it stops the momentum of the show. A scene that works beautifully in isolation might not serve the larger story. The willingness to kill your darlings, to prioritize the whole over any individual part, is what separates good shows from great ones. I've seen this firsthand. When we were working on The Outsiders, which I produced and which went on to win the Tony Award for Best Musical, the creative team made significant changes during previews. They trusted the process, they listened to the audience, and they had the courage to make bold adjustments, even when it meant letting go of material they'd spent months developing. That willingness to adapt is a huge part of why the show succeeded. In business, how often do teams hold on to strategies, products, or processes that aren't working simply because they invested time and resources in them? How often does ego prevent adaptation? How often does the fear of admitting this isn't working keep organizations stuck? Broadway doesn't have that luxury. Opening night is coming whether you're ready or not. The critics are coming. The audience is coming. And if the show isn't working, you fix it. You don't have a meeting about having a meeting. You fix it today. So let's bring this all together. What can you take from the Broadway rehearsal room and apply to your team, your company, your leadership starting tomorrow? Here's your rehearsal room blueprint. Number 1, start with the table read. Before your next major project, gather your entire team, not just leadership, everyone, and align on purpose. Make sure every person understands not just what you're building, but why it matters. Shared understanding of purpose is the foundation of everything else. Number 2, build psychological safety first. Before you can expect bold ideas, honest feedback, or creative risk-taking, you have to create an environment where people feel safe. That means modeling vulnerability as a leader. It means responding to mistakes with curiosity, not punishment. It means making it clear, through your actions and not just your words, that speaking up is valued. Number 3, transform your feedback culture. Make feedback immediate, specific, and in service of the work. Don't wait for annual reviews. Don't soften your message until it disappears. And don't make it personal. The goal is always to make the work better, and everyone should understand that. Number 4, find and empower your stage managers. Identify the operational leaders in your organization, the people who make everything run, and give them the authority, resources, and recognition they need. Strategy without execution is just a wish. Your stage managers turn wishes into reality. Number 5, cultivate the ensemble mindset. Break down silos. Encourage every team member to feel responsible not just for their role, but for the entire outcome. Create a culture where people adapt, cover for each other, and solve problems in real time, because they're committed to a shared standard of excellence. Number 6, embrace iteration. Build, test, learn, improve. Don't fall in love with your first draft. Be willing to cut what isn't working, even if you invested heavily in it. The goal is not to be right the first time. The goal is to get it right. These are not abstract principles. These are practices that are tested 8 times a week under extraordinary pressure in front of the most demanding audiences in the world. And they work. I want to leave you with one final thought. Every night on Broadway, the curtain goes up. And in that moment, there is no safety net, no second take, no algorithm to optimize the performance. It's just human beings in a room telling a story to other human beings. And the reason it works, the reason it has worked for over a century, is not because of any single brilliant individual. It's because of a system, a culture, a set of principles that prioritize trust over control, collaboration over hierarchy, and the relentless pursuit of excellence over the comfort of good enough. That's what the rehearsal room teaches us, and that's what I believe every leader, every team, and every organization can learn from Broadway. Thank you so much for joining me for this very first episode of Curtain Call Conversations. I'm Sue Gilad, and I cannot wait to continue this journey with you. Next time, we're going to talk about something very close to my heart: How Theater Saves Teenagers, Confidence, Belonging, Mental Health, and Why Arts Education Might Be the Most Important Investment We Can Make in the Next Generation. Until then, remember, the best performances come from the best rehearsals. So go rehearse.